I had just finished pouring my second cup of coffee when the phone rang. The kind of ring that feels too sharp for morning ears. I glanced at the screen. Lila's school. "Ms. Garrison, this is Principal Westbrook. You need to come right now." Her voice cracked like something had already broken. "The police are already here." My heart stopped, then took off running. "Is Lila okay? She's not hurt. But, just come." I didn't even turn off the burner. I grabbed my keys, shoved my feet into the closest shoes I could find, and drove like muscle memory was the only thing keeping me steady. Santa Rosa Elementary had never looked more like a crime scene. 2 squad cars lined the front drive. The lights weren't flashing, but the presence was loud enough. Parents clustered near the gate, whispering, pointing. I parked half on the curb, ignored the stairs, and pushed through the front doors. A young officer met me in the hallway. "Are you Estelle Garrison?" I nodded. "Follow me, please." He led me past the front office, into a smaller room, bare walls, plastic chairs, the kind of space meant for bad news and nervous waiting. On the table sat a tablet sealed inside a clear plastic evidence bag. I didn't need to see the case to recognize it, sleek black with a deep scratch across the back. Madison's iPad. "This was found in your granddaughter's backpack," he said carefully. The teacher thought it was hers and opened it to check a homework app. What she found, she called us immediately. I opened my mouth, but no words came. The officer studied me for a beat, then gently slid a chair out. "We need you to take a look." I sat down, barely aware of my own movement. He tapped the screen through the plastic. The iPad woke. And just like that, my quiet morning shattered. What stared back at me was not a school app, nor cartoons, nor a family photo. It was something I couldn't yet name. But I knew without a doubt that everything was about to change. The officer handed me a pair of gloves before peeling back the evidence bag. I didn't ask why. My fingers trembled as I slipped them on the latex, catching on my rings. He tapped the screen again, then stepped back. "Swipe right." I did. At first it was just text-long email threads buried in an encrypted folder that had somehow auto-opened once the tablet unlocked. Financial documents, spreadsheets labeled with acronyms I didn't recognize, but the numbers were large. Too large. Offshore transfers, internal reports, names I'd never heard. And then I reached the photos. They weren't family pictures. A man, tall, confident, sharply dressed, stood next to Madison at a rooftop bar, her hand resting on his knee. Another photo. The same man shirtless in a hotel room mirror, with Madison's reflection behind him. Her hair was wet. She was smiling. The officer's voice broke through my haze. "His name is Declan Moore, CEO of Livian Pharmaceuticals, Madison's company's main competitor." I felt cold. Like all the heat had rushed to my face and left everything else hollow. I stared at the image again. Declan smug. Madison laughing. Neither of them aware of the camera. Or maybe they were. Maybe that was the point. "She's been under quiet observation for a while," the officer added. "Your granddaughter bringing this iPad in. It accelerated everything." I blinked. "Observation," he nodded. "Madison Kramer, executive at Halterix Pharma. Your daughter-in-law." I nodded slowly. He continued. "This is internal evidence, leaks communications transactions. If it's authenticated, it's enough for criminal charges." My thoughts reeled. Ian, my son. His whole world orbited around Madison. He trusted her with his life. And Lila, sweet Lila. Her mother tucked her into bed every night. I gripped the edge of the table. "Does Ian know?" The officer shook his head. "We haven't contacted him yet. We needed to speak with you first." I stood, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. I had to get out of that room. "I'll tell him," I said, barely above a whisper. And I walked out, not yet knowing how. I stood outside the school's front gate for what felt like a full hour. My purse vibrated, calls, texts. I ignored them all. My legs finally carried me home, but my thoughts stayed trapped inside that police file. At the kitchen sink, I stared at the empty space where Madison's coffee mug used to sit, always the same one, matte black initials etched in gold. She never liked clutter, never liked my advice either. "You don't have to stay so long, Estelle," she'd say with a half smile, already scrolling through emails. "I don't want Lila getting used to you doing everything for her." I used to think that was her version of setting boundaries. A working mother needing space. I respected that. I stayed quiet. I showed up. I read Lila bedtime stories, packed her lunches, waited in carpool lines Madison never had time for. I washed their sheets when I came over, washed Lila's hair too, because Madison was always between meetings, always catching flights. And I was always there. I remember the first time Madison let me in through the garage because the housekeeper was out. "Just don't go upstairs," she'd said. "It's a disaster." I nodded, never questioned it. Now I wonder if the disaster wasn't the mess. It was what she didn't want seen. The lies must have started early, earlier than I can trace. Maybe before the wedding when Ian brought her home with that nervous pride and she kissed me on the cheek like she already owned the house. But she always looked me in the eye, always said thank you, always smiled the same way, even when she didn't mean it. I sat down at the table feeling something fragile inside me shift. If I'd missed this, what else had I been blind to? Lila was curled up on the living room couch, knees pulled to her chest, a fleece blanket wrapped around her shoulders like armor. Her juice cup sat untouched on the end table. I heard the soft rhythm of cartoons playing, but she wasn't watching. Her eyes were fixed on the window, where the light from the porch caught the edges of her curls. "Hey, sweetheart," I said gently, sitting beside her. She leaned into me without a word. Her skin was warm against my side. Her small body, usually in constant motion, was still. It was the stillness that frightened me most. I smoothed her hair and tried to keep my voice steady. "Can I ask you something?" I whispered. She nodded, slow and cautious. "Do you remember which iPad you took this morning?" She looked down at her lap, then pulled the blanket tighter around her. "It was black," she murmured. "Not the blue one I use for games. The black one was on the table." I nodded, waiting. "Mom said not to touch the black one," she added after a pause. "She said it was for work, and it had boring stuff. But she left in a hurry. I thought maybe it was mine. I didn't mean to." Her voice cracked a little at the end. I reached for her juice and held it up. "You didn't do anything wrong, baby." She took a small sip and leaned her head against my arm. The truth hovered in the room like a storm cloud no one wanted to name. She hadn't asked about the police. She hadn't asked about her mom. But her silence said everything. "Ian's working late," I said more to myself than her. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Is Mom mad?" "No," I said too quickly. "No, sweetheart. Everything's fine." I kissed the top of her head, hoping the lie would hold until I figured out how to tell the truth. Because when Ian came home tonight, everything was going to change. Ian came home just after 7, shoulders dusted with fatigue and the kind of distracted energy that never really settles. He dropped his bag by the counter and smiled when he saw Lila asleep on the couch. "Rough day?" he asked, rinsing an apple in the sink. I hesitated, watching him slice it clean in half. "You could say that." He caught the tone immediately. "What's wrong?" I took a breath. "The school called me this morning. Lila took Madison's iPad by mistake." He frowned. "Okay, so..." She probably felt embarrassed. "It's not that simple." My throat tightened. "The police were there, Ian. They showed me what was on it. Files, messages, pictures. Things that shouldn't be there." He froze mid-bite. "What kind of things?" I looked at him, wishing I didn't have to say it. "Madison and a man named Declan Moore. From Livian Pharmaceuticals." For a moment the room went perfectly still. Then he laughed once, short, humorless. "That's absurd. You must have misunderstood." "I saw it, Ian. They showed me everything." He slammed the knife down, the blade clattering against the sink. "Mom, you've never liked her. You've been waiting for something like this. Do you even hear yourself?" I tried to stay calm, but his anger rolled through the room like a wave. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to protect you." Protect me, he barked. By accusing my wife of cheating and corporate crime, God, Mom, you always think you know better. His voice echoed down the hall. I didn't follow him. The sound of his door slamming told me enough. Later that night, I heard the back door creak open. I moved quietly toward the kitchen. Through the window, Madison stood on the porch phone pressed to her ear. They saw it, she whispered. But I'll fix it. My hand trembled against the wall. She turned slightly, scanning the yard before stepping back inside. I waited until I heard her footsteps fade, then reached for the phone and called the officer. I told them I was running errands. Instead, I followed her. Madison left the house in a rush. No kiss for Lila, no eye contact with me. Just a clipped back soon, and the sound of her heels tapping across the front steps. I waited exactly 2 minutes before I slid into my car and eased into traffic behind her. She drove across town past the grocery store and the office park until she pulled into a dimly lit parking garage beneath a boutique hotel. I parked 2 levels up where I could still see the entrance. 10 minutes passed. Then a black sedan pulled in. Clean, unmarked, tinted windows. Madison stepped out of her car. She didn't hesitate, not even a glance around. The man who stepped out of the sedan wore a ball cap and dark blazer. Even from a distance, I could tell they knew each other. She walked straight to him, touched his arm. He didn't smile. They talked fast, too low for me to hear. I leaned out just far enough to catch the license plate. Then I slid back behind the pillar and held my breath. That night, I went to the precinct. The same officer met me in the hallway, his sleeves rolled up, a tired look in his eyes. I gave him the plate number and the garage address. He didn't say much, just nodded, and disappeared into a back room. When he returned, he looked different. Focused. Grim. The man you saw is Declan Moore, he said. He's under federal investigation. But we've never been able to tie him directly to anyone inside Halden Pharmaceuticals until now. I felt my stomach twist. Madison. She's not just a contact, he said. That iPad you brought in filled in every missing blank. She might be the reason this whole thing cracks open. I thought of Lila, her backpack, that small moment of confusion that led to all of this. She's the reason we have a case now, he added quietly. But it puts her in danger, and you too. I didn't flinch. I just asked what they needed me to do. They wanted me to wear a wire. I said no. The agent looked disappointed but didn't push. Then stay alert, he told me. And if you ever hear something, anything, record it. That night, I tucked Lila into bed and pretended everything was ordinary. Ian was still at work, or pretending to be. The house felt strange, like it was holding its breath. Madison came home late, her perfume hitting the air before she even stepped through the door. She smiled when she saw me, tight and practiced. You're up, she said, setting her keys down. Long day, long week, I replied. She laughed softly. Don't I know it? Then she walked past me toward the kitchen, humming under her breath. It was almost convincing. The next afternoon, I had to pick up a prescription downtown. When I came back earlier than planned, Madison's car was already in the driveway. Inside, her voice floated down the hallway, low, sharp, unfamiliar. I froze near the coat closet, pulling my phone from my purse. I hit record. I told you not to call here, she snapped. Yes, I know what she saw. If Estelle opens her mouth, she won't be around to talk. The air left my lungs. I leaned against the wall, my pulse thudding in my ears. There was a pause, then a quieter tone. No, Ian doesn't know. He wouldn't believe her anyway. I stopped the recording and slipped the phone back into my pocket, forcing myself to move. When I stepped into the kitchen, Madison was pouring water into a glass, her voice suddenly light. Oh, you're back early. Everything okay? Just a headache, I said. Picked up my medicine. She smiled again, that same careful smile. Hope you feel better. I nodded, walking past her, clutching my purse so tightly, my knuckles ached. Upstairs, I locked the bedroom door, pressed play, and listened again this time, making sure I hadn't imagined it. I didn't call Ian. I called the agent instead. I didn't sleep. I kept the phone on the nightstand, replaying the audio so many times the words carved themselves into my skull. By morning, the agent called. She's running, he said. Outbound flight to Zurich. Layover in Toronto. Booked under a corporate alias she's used before. Declan Moore is on the manifest. My hand gripped the receiver tighter. When tomorrow night? 8:55 p.m. out of Logan. I hung up without saying goodbye. Walked into the kitchen. The kettle screamed on the stove, but I didn't turn it off. Instead, I sat down, opened my messages, and typed one line to Ian. You need to listen to this. I hit send, then forwarded the recording. No begging, no explanations. Just the truth. Then I waited and waited. No response, no typing bubbles, no call. By evening, I'd convinced Lila we were having a sleepover in the guest room. I let her stay up late with popcorn and cartoons. She didn't ask about her mom. That scared me more than if she had. The next morning, I opened the blinds and stared out. Ian's truck was gone. Not in the driveway. Not parked across the street. I stood there holding the curtain like it might steady me. Downstairs, the house was too quiet. The leftover popcorn bowl was still on the table. The sun hadn't yet warmed the floors. But then I saw it on the kitchen counter. His favorite travel mug. Half full. Still warm. He'd left without coffee. Whatever that meant, it wasn't routine. I reached for my phone. Still no messages. Outside, a breeze picked up. I could hear the faint sound of garbage trucks down the block. The world was moving like nothing had happened. But something had. And I wasn't the only one who finally understood it. The airport was a blur of motion and noise, but the corner where I sat felt sealed off from it, quiet, suspended like the air was holding its breath. The agents spoke in low tones near the gate, their jackets unmarked but unmistakable. I kept my eyes on the departure board, on the name of the city she thought she could disappear to. Ian stood about 20 feet away, just inside the stream of travelers. He hadn't said much when we met in the parking lot. Just a nod, a glance that told me he'd listened to the recording. His face looked older overnight. When the announcement for boarding crackled over the speakers, the agents shifted. The sound of rolling wheels came next, a soft rhythm that made my pulse quicken. Madison appeared at the end of the concourse, a pale trench coat, sunglasses too large for the dim light. She moved fast, dragging a silver suitcase that gleamed under the fluorescent bulbs. Declan Moore was beside her, his stride confident, his hand grazing her elbow. Ian saw them first. His body stiffened, his fists clenched at his sides. Madison didn't notice him, not yet. She was laughing at something Declan said, the sound sharp and hollow, like glass against tile. The agents waited for the perfect moment. One spoke quietly into his sleeve. Another moved behind me, eyes fixed on the pair as they handed their passports to the attendant. Then the command came short, clear. Now. The agents closed in. Madison turned, startled at first, then furious. You can't, she started, but the rest vanished under the noise of the crowd, and Declan's voice, shouting something I couldn't make out. Ian didn't move. He just stared as if trying to find the woman he'd once loved somewhere inside that chaos. I didn't move either. Madison's gaze swept the crowd until it landed on us. There was no plea, no shame, just pure cold anger. They led her away in handcuffs, her suitcase left, standing upright by the gate. When the agents asked me to come give my statement, I followed without looking back. Weeks have passed. The house still creaks in the mornings, but the silence no longer feels heavy. It feels earned. Lila hums while she colors at the kitchen table. Her legs swing back and forth, not quite touching the floor. She's back to asking a dozen questions a day. Why clouds move, why carrots crunch, why some people lie. I answer what I can. The rest I let be. Ian watches Lila like he's afraid to blink. He doesn't talk about Madison, not anymore. And I don't press. We've settled into a rhythm. We bake muffins that always come out a little lopsided. We walk the neighborhood, Lila picking up rocks she insists are lucky. At night, I read her the same book 3 times, just because she asks, her head tucked into my shoulder like nothing in the world ever cracked. She doesn't ask where her mother is. She hasn't since the day of the arrest. But I know she remembers. Sometimes she touches the corners of her blanket, the way she did that first night when the police had just left, and I was still shaking. The iPad is long gone, tagged and sealed in some chain of evidence. What remains is the confiscation form, folded and tucked into the back of my dresser drawer. It has my signature on it, uneven from that first moment of shock, and the serial number that started everything. I never thought one mistake could unravel so much, but I also never thought a child's honesty would be what forced the truth to the surface. Lila's laughter carries down the hall as she chases her reflection across the living room rug. I set the kettle on the stove and glance out the window. The sun is settling low over the fence, casting everything in long gold shadows, and I finally exhale.